Hello and welcome to Today I Found This Interesting. This is the first episode of the podcast, so let's do a quick introduction to the podcast and what this is about. I think that podcasts, especially in this market, are so oversaturated with long podcasts. So this podcast, all the gameplay you see in the background, all the stuff that I talk about during the gameplay, it's all in real time. And every single episode will be a single day within Stardew Valley, and if I find a topic particularly interesting, I will talk about it for 2 Stardew Valley days, but not anymore. And every single episode of this podcast is going to be something that I found interesting that day or recently within the past couple of days. This podcast will upload every 3 days. I'm hoping 11 PM my time, most of the time. And yeah, that's the basic introduction. So with that being said, let's get into the topic of today's episode. So today's topic is one of the things that I consider one of my things. I call them things because they're things that I'm highly interested in, and that is, today, the Backrooms. So, if you don't know what the Backrooms is, it started on 4chan, I believe, in 2019, with an image of, give me a second, this order is really messing with my order of operations. There we go. It started with a single image of a back room, and people started uploading more and more images of spaces that are considered to be liminal, which is where it feels like you know what it is, but it's not exactly what it is. And then it formed a fandom known as Backrooms. Now, this would go on to spew a lot of stuff, like a whole YouTube series from Kane Parson, I believe it's Kane Parson, and a whole wiki of millions of different levels that people just come up with and add to the wiki because they want to for their creativity. And it's insane, and I love Backrooms. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. The movie came out recently, I found it really good. But today's topic is the gamification of the Backrooms, because the Backrooms itself has many different interpretations of its concept. But the main one that we see that gets popular is the game version of Backrooms. Now, there's obvious examples that we can draw for this topic. For example, the game that I'm going to talk about for this topic directly, Escape the Backrooms. But to understand why I want to talk about that, we have to talk about the original image. So back when these images were releasing, it wasn't that popular. It was a pretty niche fandom. And then they started having a Reddit to upload these images and create levels, and then a fandom wiki where they would upload levels, entities, and this is where the gamification of the Backrooms began, because the Backrooms itself is not a game, it's more liminal spaces, but the wiki turned it into a game. Now, what is gamification? Gamification within its specific terms is adding game elements such as points, timed elements, and rewards into stuff such as work or education to encourage engagement and learning. But I'm not using the term correctly this episode, because I'm using it within the context of changing something that was not in the game into something that is sort of a game. Because I want to talk about the Backrooms wiki. The Backrooms wiki itself very much is, to me, a gamification of the original image of the Backrooms. Because the whole concept of the original Backrooms was, the very first concept was, let me throw these on the ground, an endless row of halls that you can never escape from and you go mad. That was the original concept of the Backrooms. But over time, with the wiki, it changed. How did it change? It became a game. Because the wiki started adding levels, such as level 1, level 2, level 9, 5577, whatever it is, the staircase level from Escape the Backrooms, which is where I know it from. But it turned it into a game because it started adding levels, and it started adding entities and threats and items that you could find throughout the Backrooms. And in doing so, it felt very game-like, because it felt like you were trying to survive this vast world and find your way out. Now, the wiki's not very clear on how to actually get out. There's like no definitive way out from the wiki version, aside from like one arcade level. And like most of my knowledge when I'm talking about the wiki here is from Escape the Backrooms and the videos that I've seen on it from that one guy who talks about different levels and entities and all that. I don't remember his name. But he was very popular back in 2020, 2021, all those years ago. And so, thus the Backrooms became like a game. You're going through different levels, trying to find your way out and survive. And I think the wiki very much is game-like with its Backrooms version. And then Kane Parsons, if I'm getting that wrong, I'm sorry, came out with his version of the Backrooms, which very much was not a game at all. It was very much a one level which is all interconnected to each other, and it's like this big world. And so it went away from the wiki version and it went into its own continuity, where it wasn't a game, it was its whole thing. What I find interesting is the engagement because of the gamification of the Backrooms, because a lot more people create their own levels because it felt like they were creating this expansive world with this whole liminal concept. And that definitely creates so much engagement, which is kind of the whole concept of gamification, is to create engagement and learning and improvement. But the reason why I talk about the wiki is because I want to talk about Escape the Backrooms. When I talk about the Backrooms games and the games that were, because obviously whenever something becomes popular, there's going to be a game made out of it. The Backrooms was very popular with video games. Now, I have a lot of talk, I've seen a lot of talk about which is the best one. Now, there is a lot of contenders. Hello, Haley! Sorry, this is, yeah. There's a lot of contenders for the best Backrooms game. I think there's like the complex, Escape Backrooms Together and Escape the Backrooms, or Backrooms Escape Together, sorry, I got that wrong. And there's quite a few contenders. There's no spring onions, are you kidding me? What I find interesting about these games is how they take the concept of the Backrooms and the way they push it. So, speaking on the complex, it's very much like the Kane Parsons video, and like the original concept of the image, which is it's this liminal space that you get stuck in and you have to explore. That is the concept that game takes on, but something like Backrooms Escape Together or Escape the Backrooms, they take it as a game. But I think Backrooms Escape Together is the sort of medium between those two. It starts to give game elements, but it also has that original element of the original image. But Escape the Backrooms, and if we're talking about my personal favourite Backrooms game that come out during the whole Backrooms game craze, it's Escape the Backrooms, because it is an adaptation of the wiki. And I say that very clearly because that is the, I recently rewatched the devlogs, which is why I'm so stuck up on this recently. A lot of the ideas taken for the game were taken from the wiki and suggestions from people in the comment section saying add this level on this Discord server, and they were all from the wiki, which is very gamified, a very gamified version of the concept. And honestly, if we're talking about adaptations of the wiki, Escape the Backrooms is single-handedly the best adaptation of it, because it takes those elements of gamification from the wiki's version of the Backrooms and it enhances them and it turns it into a game. For example, the level system that is developed within the wiki is used as the level system within the game. The levels within the game, I make jokes saying they aren't very interconnected because Escape the Backrooms, for context, is developed by, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but you can probably look it up. And it was developed in 2022 and fully released like 3 years later. Like 10 months ago, I believe. And it was developed in early access with no update for about like 18 months before the final version came out. And it directly took the game elements of the wiki and basically adapted the wiki version into a game, which I think worked out very well for the game because the gamification of the Backrooms is what made it so popular in the first place, because people can engage and make their own levels and all that. And the fact that he took these elements, he turned them into a single game, and he took elements from his community, and the community going, hey, add this level, and he goes and does that. He listens to his community and what they want, and then goes and puts these levels in the game. It feels like there is engagement directly with the community all the way back to the game. I think that's what made the devlogs so popular. And honestly, the game is just like incredibly good. Like it's one of those games where I can go, oh yeah, it's incredibly good, and then if you see me play the game, I'll say to half levels, oh, I hate this level, because yeah, some of the design choices are kind of but also the levels are just really good. I love the game so much. It's really good because it takes those elements that made the wiki so fun and it directly throws them into the game. And honestly, adapting the Backrooms into the game is like free money, because the Backrooms themselves have so much game material, because the wiki is basically gamifying the Backrooms originally anyways. And honestly, that does kind of bring me to the movie, because I thought the movie was good. I didn't fully understand the whole still life concepts that was within the movie. I don't know if it follows the YouTube continuity. If you want to let me know if it does, absolutely please do, because I would take that on, but I'm not sure if it does actually follow the YouTube concept too much. But like, it was fun, it was good, and I liked the exploration of characters within the movie. But if that's the YouTube lore, I think it's kind of silly. Like, I don't think it's too serious if that's like the YouTube lore, because like, it's a cool concept, but also it's not very scary if that's the concept. Obviously there are scary moments in the movie, but it's not that scary movie. It's just more like a uncomfortable movie at times with the exploration, which I think it's what it should be. The Kane Parsons one is much more cinematic compared to the wiki version, which is very much a bit more silly compared to the film version. Which kind of brings my point that if it is kind of the concept I think it is kind of silly. Which I guess does fit the essence of the Backrooms very much so. But yeah, I think that honestly, Escape the Backrooms is my favourite Backrooms game, and probably my favourite piece of Backrooms media because of the way it adapts the wiki. It's not completely 100% like the wiki. Like, I'm not going to even begin to go into like all the details of why it's not like the wiki, but it changes a lot of things, admittedly, and you know what? That's cool. I think being able to adapt your material that you're working with to what you need, I need some more energy, is good. I think that is a good skill to have. So, yeah. Anyway, that is episode 1. I went into this with like no notes, so like if it sounds a bit discombobulated, that is why. I just haven't had any notes for this episode to talk on. Future episodes, we will have notes on what I want to talk about with facts and all that to be able to guide us through these episodes. But I thought episode 1, we just go in a little raw and establish a vibe here. But yeah, so 3 days per episode. Not 3 days per episode. 1 episode every 3 days, and we're gonna go till perfection. And I'm not going to normally tease what I'm going to do next episode. I want kind of it to be like a drop of like random topics. But I will tease the next episode today because I already know what I'm doing next episode. And that is, I'm going to talk about the film Obsession. And be prepared, because that one, I'm going to have notes. I'm going to be prepared. I've watched it 3 times already, 2 times in theatres. I'm going to watch it a 4th time before next episode. So I'm going to have notes. I'm going to be prepared. I got topics I want to talk about for that one. So if you're excited, please do like and subscribe to the podcast, because I'm going to keep my promise. This episode was under 20 minutes. So this is kind of the length of episodes that I'm expecting. Well, they might be a little longer when we do tomorrow's episode, because we're going to do fishing tomorrow in Stardew Valley. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you next time. Goodbye.